We start off as usual with some prayers. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Punaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great vigor. Our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. Om Shri Rama Rama Rameti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanani. We delight in the beautiful name of Shri Ram. We do this again and again. For even if we remember once this name and the story of Rama, it bestows a fruit equal to the recitation of 1,000 names of the Lord Vishnu. So we pick up the story of Rama again, and we've been away from it for a few weeks, so a little bit of background and catch up. So you remember that Hanuman had created havoc there in Lanka. He had jumped across the ocean, having bade farewell to Sita, who he now found closer to his heart perhaps than Rama, and saw there Rama and Sita as two sides of the same coin. Without a Rama, there's no Sita. Without a Sita, there's no Rama. And so we see not only this connection between husband and wife, but we also see this deep, deep spiritual connection. We might even say that philosophically, that the jiva estranged from the Atman has to be reconciled and united. And so we can see how Hanuman has returned and how he briefed all the Vanaras there on the latest events and all the information. He has a lot of information because he used his visit to Lanka as an opportunity to suss out, to have a reconnaître of the whole of the defenses and the layout of the city. He was hugely impressed with the city, seeing it as a very sophisticated place. And he relays how he met Sita and how he managed everything about her, how she suspected him in the beginning. He witnessed how she was taunted. He witnessed how thin she was, emaciated, how she was pining away for Rama. And yet she was confident that Rama would rescue her. So, and in the course of the narrative, he then goes, of course, naturally all of the Vanaras start celebrating. Yes, our mission is complete. And a spell of joy spreads throughout the assembly. And much jumping, much dancing, we can just imagine. It was an indication of the success in the search for Sita. Anyway, they go back to where Rama is, Lakshmana, and where Sugriva is, and they then he starts relaying everything, every single thing. And Valmiki describes in great detail this relaying of this story. So naturally, with this spread of joy, it was good news. There was excitement over the whole camp as Hanuman recounts all the events. And also, above all, he relates the blazing purity that he saw in Sita. And he tells Rama, she is pining for you. It's a bittersweet moment, a moment of joy where Rama is enormously happy that Sita hasn't been eaten by Rakshasas or anything like that, but she is at least alive and at least safe for the time being, despite the threats which are there. And Hanuman could have crossed the ocean with her on his back. But she said, no, Rama must rescue me personally himself. And so, in relating this, with all the excitement, how he remained concealed in the boughs of the tree under which Sita was kept imprisoned, how he could observe all the happenings going on, how he observed how Ravana had courted her for all that he was worth, how he saw the contempt that was received in return by Sita. And then, of course, Sita's moment where she decides to put an end to herself, so desperate was she. And there's no consistency, or there was a consistency, I should say, in her decision about it, coming under such pressure. And that Rama, who discharged his mystic missile at the Chitrakutam just to chase a crow, or a crow demon that was threatening to hurt Sita, and until that crow demon surrendered before Rama, had not taken any action against the abductor of Sita, but his inference that she was dead was perhaps the cause of his inaction. Anyway, in that case, her retaining the life under adverse circumstances was, of course, intolerable, undesirable. So she was going to do away with it, or again, do away with her own life. And if Hanuman had not employed a strategy and intervened at the very last moment, the irreparable tragedy would have taken place. So just in time, he sang the glory of the Rama and his illustrious ancestors, and this was the moment where Sita suspended her desperate fatal plan. All this was related to Rama. Hanuman's message made her correct herself, adjust herself, restore her balance, and she received new life. She was prepared to keep it lingering only for 1 month more. This was all related to Rama. And in the meantime, if Rama didn't make his appearance in Lanka to mete out the punishment that was due to the Rakshasas, then everything would be over with Sita. And this was the critical position that Anjaneya was obliged to tell Rama. So in the course of his narrative, Hanuman produced the crest jewel of Sita to Rama. And of course, recognizing it, Rama was visibly moved. Sorrow and joy alternatively were evident on his face. And then Maruti, son of the wind, as we know, as Anjaneya and Hanuman, then detailed the method he adopted to gain access to Ravana's presence. And this gave a background to a kind of strategic plan. The king of Lanka was a marvelous being, he related. He was endowed with many brilliant parts. But of course, it was all spoiled by his inordinate lust. And that was the one evil that marred his entire career. Lust, not only for the possession of what was not rightly his, but also pride enters into it, ownership enters into it, greed enters into it. This is really the Ravana in all of us. And so we ourselves have to address this issue and address it in a ruthless and yet strategic way. So Mitra already gained a moral victory over him, and Rama was to complete it by exterminating his physical existence, ridding therefore the whole world of the menace. And we have to recall how this story begins with this, that this is Rama's mission. Rama is the embodiment of Dharma, as we know. And so, as the embodiment of harmony, of dharma, his mission in life consists of the veneration of the holy, the protection of the good, and the destruction of the wicked. And the loss of Sita, his mission was thwarted in a way, but also became the entrance for the destruction. This is how life works. If she was killed, it proved Rama's impotency. And if she was defiled, then it was a disgrace to him. So his coming on the earth, his advent, was a failure if all of this came to pass, if no action was taken. Same thing in our own spiritual life. Action has to be taken. We can't sit around and wait for salvation or wait for the kingdom of heaven to come around the corner. You can look out the window as much as you like. The king is not going to come. Why? Because the king is already here. That we have to discover. So all of this dilemma was there. And of these issues, Rama was a little dejected by the prospect. It seemed as if wickedness had triumphed over virtue, but we know in truth that virtue always triumphs. Satyameva Jati, says the Mundaka Upanishad. Truth alone triumphs. But Anjaneya's adventure verified the truth that Sita was proof against defilement and that Rama's weapon against the wicked was going to be victorious very soon. And so the whole thing turns in a positive way. A married man has his limitations and personal problems. Without help from others, he can't undo the limitations and he can't solve the problems. And so Rama's life bears testimony to this very fact. But on the other hand, a celibate of sterling character has no personal problem whatsoever, and therefore he alone is competent to solve the problems of those involved in worldly life. So in this respect, Anjaneya stands in sharp relief against the other characters. And he comes of a subhuman stock, indicating that the highest possibilities of life are not in terms of a privileged section of society, but are the common heritage of all spiritual aspirants, regardless. That of the spiritual beauty of the celibate life excels all other beauties. This is made evident in the divisions of this very epic. But this leads us then to the Yuddha Kundam, and we pick the story up from there. So let us have a look and see what plan there is now from here on. Rama has heard very patiently what Hanuman has had to say, with the heart and eyes overflowing. And when it comes to the end of his narrative, he says, "You see, the deed done by Hanuman, no one else in the world could even conceive of attempting, crossing the sea and entering into a foreign territory, Lanka, protected by Ravana and his formidable hosts, and accomplishing the task set by his own king, not only fully, but beyond the fondest hopes of all." And don't forget that Hanuman is compared to the concentrated mind, the mind that determines that they will take the bhava, or the attitude of a servant toward a master, and actually now servant toward the mistress, Sita. Seeing Ram and Sita as one thing, having seen the purity and beauty of Sita, he now sees a bigger picture. And only this concentrated mind can jump across the ocean of what we call samsara, this world. And so Hanuman has a very special place in this whole story. Hanuman becomes the embodiment of the Guru. And as we said the other day on Guru Purnima, the Guru's job is to show you that a purified mind becomes its own illuminator, becomes the Guru. And it saddened Rama also to think that it was not in his power to reward Hanuman at all, not even adequately, not even a little bit, for the supreme joy he had once the news was brought to him. And so he says, "Oh Hanuman, let this embrace of mine stand as an acknowledgement of all that my heart feels, of gratitude for your great service to me." Well, the embrace of Rama is enough, more than enough. So saying, while his whole being thrilled with grateful love, he takes Hanuman into his arms and clasps him into his breast. And we see typically how Hanuman, images of Hanuman, have the chest exposed, and there lies Sitaram. And then he says, Sugriva says, "Well, Hanuman, yes, you have indeed wrought a wonder." He adds his congratulations. "You have entered Lanka so strongly guarded by the Rakshasas, and you have discovered Sita, and by consoling her, you have preserved her life. So bringing back good news of her, you have saved my life also. But how are we now going to cross this sea? You have done it. How can we all do it? We haven't got your power. We have to look for our local resources. How can our huge army reach the other shore? And how can we do it without raising an alarm? So before we can attack Ravana's city and the Rakshasas on the Rakshasas' army, we have to first cross the sea, and I don't see any way of doing it. Now, those who know the geography will see that there is a small sliver, a landmass between the tip of India, Rameshwaram, and Sri Lanka. So that gives you a clue about how we can do it. Anyway, the joy is there of Hanuman's achievement and the good news he has brought, but this is overlaid by a certain level of anxiety about how they will manage. Anyway, the Vanara king said, "Well, what is this, my Lord Rama? What need is there for dejection? Here are my warriors. They're ready to lay down their whole lives for you, and let it be our joy to transport you and Lakshmana to Lanka. And don't have any doubt that we can do it. The moment Hanuman sees Lanka, you may take the fortress that the fortress itself has fallen. So doubt only makes the warrior weak and afraid and should be cast aside. How victory is certain. Our victory is certain, and the feeling of confidence in my heart at this moment is a good enough omen for me." It seems a curious thing that Sugriva has to say this to Rama to boost his courage. But it's the same with all of us. Humanly speaking, we can watch and see how from time to time dejection comes upon us, and how it's necessary to give ourselves an internal lecture. Come on, get up. Don't stop until the goal is reached, says the Katha Upanishad. Swami Vivekananda's general loose translation, Uttishta Jagrata Pratyavaran Nibodhata. Arise, awake. Don't stop until the goal is reached. Almost daily, we have to remind ourselves through the various disciplines to be positive and fill the mind with positivity as a displacement mechanism for the negativity that often occupies the mind. Anyway, the Vanara king also said, "What is this, my Lord Rama? What need is there for dejection? See, here are my warriors. They're ready to lay down their lives." So, thus Sugriva reassures Rama and inspires him to action. Then Rama and Hanuman discuss matters about Lanka. Now, we cannot take any action. We have to stand back, and we have to have a strategic plan for everything. There's no doubt. And that brings us to a cool-headedness. So Rama and Hanuman discuss the matters. They discuss Lanka. They get all the information, what the town looks like, how the fort is there a moat as a defense system? Are there other defenses? Here in Ireland, we can soon see the style, the model of big castles which have a moat, a defense system Even if people get past a gate, the gate is just an intermediate section where even if you get caught there, there's a big hole and people can pour hot oil on you and so on, give you a delightful hot bath, maybe in such a cold climate, but not so good. Anyway, so they discuss all of these, and understanding nothing, Hanuman described the wealth of Lanka, the happy lives of the Rakshasas, their confidence in Ravana, and their affection for him, which is an interesting thing to observe. And he tells Rama of the might and size of Ravana's army, the strength, the structure of the fortress, the alertness of the sentry, the moats, the walls, the gates, the catapults, the drawbridges, the care and thoroughness of all the arrangements of defense. And he also explains how the coast, too, is carefully guarded so that no enemy ship could approach it. So we have to have all this information. Even with secular decisions, first call of order is, let's get all the information. And yet, you may be certain, he said, one Vanara army is fully equal to the conquest of Lanka. We have with us peerless warriors like Angada, Dvijvid, Minda, Jambavan, Panasa, Nala, Nila, all of these he mentions. We have an enormous army. We shall fly in the sky without touching the ground, destroy Lanka. We put it in modern context, see. An air force is there also. I recently heard a beautiful story that a young boy, a Jewish boy, was telling his father what he learned at the Sunday school about the Exodus and how the Israelites moved away and how they came to the Red Sea or Reed Sea and how the Egyptians followed, changed their mind, let's chase them. And he says, at that point, he tells his father, who likes what he heard, this is faithful to the biblical accounts. And then he says they sent in the big 15s. And then the artillery moved in and they followed by all the foot soldiers and completely destroyed the Pharaoh's army. And the father says, is that what you learned? He says, no, but you wouldn't believe what they told me. So we leave it at that. So we can update the scenario, even in these days of modern warfare. Anyway, the description was there about Lanka, its geographic features, its mountains, its forest defenses. And he says, these are nothing to us, actually. We shall raise the city to the ground, and we shall fix the auspicious time and give us the order to start. That's a very interesting statement. You don't just do it. Auspicious time means, let's see how the weather is, but also let's see how the astronomical climate is, the right opportunity, make it a divinely auspicious moment, since this is to do with Dharma. So under the star of triumph, Uttara Palguni, at high noon, the army set forward towards the southern sea, and they were greeted only by good signs. Anyway, as they march, Rama, Sugriva, and Lakshmana, they go on talking with one another. If only Sita could know that we have set out, says Rama. You can imagine his anxiety. Sita is ignorant of this, and she has 1 month only. If she knew this, then it would encourage her to keep life going. And so scouts who knew the way, they went ahead, looking out for enemies lying in ambush, because the expectation was there. An army is about to arrive. And the army that was led through the regions that could provide food and drink for the huge army, all the logistics were in place. And with the great speed, the army crossed the mountains and the forests, heading toward the coast. The Vanaras sometimes carried Rama and Lakshmana on their shoulders so that the march might be more speedy. And every moment, the enthusiasm of the Vanara increased. They jumped and roared and sported, and Rama could hear them saying to one another, I shall kill Ravana, I shall meet and kill Ravana. Should we also not have the same resolve? I shall delete all things which are evil. What are the evil things? are things which distract our attention away from the discovery of our own true nature. So we have to rely on all the resources around us and assume that they are divinely supplied. It's a great lesson for all humanity. We also have to keep these assertions, positive assertions. Nila and Kumuda went ahead. They went on a reconnaître mission. And they went in front of the army. Strong warriors were kept in the rear, guarding it from behind. A very standard military practice, in other words. King Sugriva, Rama, and Lakshmana, they were in the middle. And Rama gave strict orders that the army should inflict no harm, no hardship on the towns and villages on their way. If you study history, you'll see that every military movement, more or less, in history, in Western history anyway, is a story of destruction. You move your army and you have no provisions. So what you do is you get your provisions from the local area and destroy and burn. If you study English history, for example, the Norman conquest, they did this. They move up towards the north and completely destroy the middle and northern kingdoms of what we call England. If we see, for example, also the European armies on the march, they do the same, and so on. He doesn't do it. He restrains his soldiers. Don't forget, Vanaras are Vanaras. Their monkey nature could be, let's go, let's destroy all the villages. So he ensures that a certain moral code is inserted in his adopted army. But the noise of the marching army, it was like the roar of the sea and filled the 8 quarters. The dust they raised covered the sky. You may wonder, how is it that there are 8 quarters? There are 4 cardinal quarters, north, south, east, west, and so on, and intermediate quarters. We can also add up and down as well. So anyway, when they come to the Mahendra mountain, Rama climbs the peak, and then from this vantage point, he can overlook the sea. So we should now think and decide, he says, how the army can cross the sea. Having reached it, we should now decide. Until that time, let us camp and rest here in the forest. And Sugriva passes the order to the commanders, and the Vanaras camp in the forest by the seashore. Now when Sugriva, Rama, and Lakshmana had satisfied themselves that the whole army had settled in comfort, the 2 brothers, they retire apart from everything else and everybody else and have a conversation. And Rama says, you see, if a person loses a dear thing, people say that time will enable him to forget about it, and he'll cease to grieve. For Lakshmana, this is not what I find. Dejection again seized Rama. His human nature is there. For the thought of Sita and her condition preyed on his mind now more than ever before. Look at the uncertainty. Will we succeed? And will Sita get to know that we are progressing toward her? All these thoughts naturally come, and doubts also enter our mind along with dejection. You see, bereavement, for example, is a disappointment. It starts off with a denial. We know this clearly from studies in bereavement. Every disappointment is a bereavement. And then we go to blaming and guilt and anger and all these other things. It takes some time before we recover. But the recovery is possible. In our own minds, we have to assess what's going on and then take remedial action. Shift the gear up to the highest levels. So now when Ravana seized Sita and carried her off, a thing that he must have regretted, Rama says, Well, breaking down and with fresh grief, he recalls all of these things. She must have cried aloud, "Ha, my lord! Ha, Rama! Ha, Lakshmana!" But she saw no one coming. And what I regret, we failed to go to her help. Every time I think of the suffering she then must have gone through, my grief swells up fresh. Not only grief, but guilt is there and all the rest of it. This is just the human condition. However, a stable mind also understands that regretting the past has nothing to do with corrective action. The past is gone. We can't do one thing. We lift one finger to change it. Anyway, what am I to do? This is Rama's dilemma. Like the limbs of one who's drunk poison, my whole body burns with pain. She's held in the grip of the cruel Rakshasas, and she is in great anguish. Therefore, her anguish is my anguish, and Janaka's great daughter, the bride who entered the home of the great Dasaratha, she lies on the bare ground, a prisoner, surrounded by the Rakshasas. Don't forget, Hanuman has described her plight, and even in her thin, emaciated condition, he still describes her beauty, and the beauty comes from her inner purity. Rama, says Lakshmana, cease from sorrow. It takes a friend sometimes, another. If you have a burden, unburden your sorrow to a close friend, a friend that can help stabilize your condition. So stop your sorrow. Soon we shall destroy Ravana and rescue Sita and take her home to Ayodhya. She'll enter the city like the goddess of chastity. So give up your grief. Arm yourself with courage. The antidote to grief is courage. And now we come to a new chapter that deals with the anxiety in Lanka itself. So we're going to leave Rama and his host here, and we're going to go back to what's happening in Lanka to Ravana. And great poets in all languages delineate with great sympathy even their bad characters, because there's good in everyone, even Ravana. And they allow gleams of goodness to shine through occasionally, for nature hasn't made anybody holy and unredeemably evil. You might even go as far as to say there are no evil people, only bad behaviors. Everybody can be rescued. And the poet's aim in this whole thing is to direct us, the reader, the listener's mind, into the path of good, to elevate the mind. This is really the difference between these great epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, and the Greek epics, which are historically, give us a historical account. But the poet wants to elevate our mind to a final conclusion, all the time, in every line. And so, what is the point of all of this? The point is to introduce a sattvic way. What does that mean? It means we have three alternative options that the mind can adopt. You can be lazy and do nothing. Imagine the situation where you just let fate take over. Sita's gone, let fate look after it. Nothing we can do. A state of hopelessness. Or we can then embrace the feeling of anger. Grief is part of it also. Grief will lead us to a state of morbidity. But the opposite also is not so good. But we require the attitude of getting up and doing something for what? For the higher purpose. And this is where sattva comes in. Purity, goodness, the absence of selfishness. So Valmiki gives us this great, great opportunity to listen to these stories and help to elevate the mind. So we who are relating the story and we are listening to Valmiki's words are held by sometimes rajasic and tamasic qualities. This we have to admit. So naturally, we tend to sympathize with these various characters much more so than with, let's say, the average reader who's untouched by this higher element, the sattvic element. And so they might regard the deeds of the hero and other sattvic characters as just fiction that is invented for blind worship. But this would be far from what we are dealing with here. We can identify ourselves with the Rajasic and Tamasic characters. If you look at any children's cartoons, this is sometimes what happens. But even when we even claim these as our own kith and kin, we would find ourselves attracted by such characters and follow their doings with considerable interest. Even a small child will want in their play to say, will I be a good one? Will I be the hero or the heroine? Please make me this character. And you might have some children who concede and say, okay, then I won't be so good, but they're not that happy about it. It's kind of built into us. Paradise Lost, the English epic on a biblical theme, is famous throughout the world. And in this poem, the great poem, the English poet Milton delineates the Almighty and the Jesus of Christianity and his spiritual son. So the human incarnation, which is Jesus, as well as several orders of angels, he describes these. But the most impressive character in the great epic is Satan in the anti-God. Supposing you have a world and the question of evil comes. Why is there a Ravana? Why is there, in modern times, dictators? Why are people then savagely rounded up and put into, say, concentration camps, and the inhumanity against man, or in modern day warfare, bombed from a height indiscriminately, destroying infrastructures and cities and displacing people? There are more refugees today than have ever been in the whole history of humanity. In the 21st century, we don't seem to have learned our lessons. And so, what is the explanation? If there is a loving and beneficent God, there must be an anti-God. We call it Satan, some personality which is not so benevolent, something that is bent on temptation and destruction, some entity who has rebelled against God and brought sin and death into the world. But you see, the critics of English poetry admire Milton's wonderful success in the characterization of this anti-God, the Satan. And in the same way, the great dramatic poet Shakespeare also has created a wonderful character in his Shylock. And even such embodiments of despicable qualities are presented by the poets as possessing courage, determination, energy, other good qualities. And these qualities attract us, even the most degenerate. And so they serve as a bright background to their blackness. Now, in Valmiki's portraits of Ravana and Kumbhakarna and so on, we also notice the same artistic skill. There are some good qualities. The cook who meets all tastes shows his skill in making out of bitter vegetables an attractive dish. And so the poet also does the same. He shows his skill in portraying evil. Now we have to turn to philosophy. What is evil? What is Satan? Well, it is our own ego. And psychologically, when our mind is no longer tuned into the highest, we get howling noises, like taking a radio broadcast and trying to tune it in. If it's not tuned properly, our howling noises result. And so everyone, regardless of their pluses and minuses, good and evil points, who has the capacity to readjust their tuning mechanism called attention and tune it into the highest. And what is spirituality? It is the art of tuning our attention continuously into the glory of the self, or what we call God. the great Holy Mother Sharada Devi made a beautiful statement comparing the rubbing of flowers with the hands or rubbing sandalwood. Then you will smell of that. Your hands will smell of it. Similarly, by concentrating on the divine, constantly doing that, then the fragrance comes to you. And she also adds, of course, it can happen instantaneously if you have absolutely no desire, if you are desireless. It's a wonderful, wonderful statement. And so the Rakshasa king was somewhat afraid also on his side, and ashamed also at the thought of the fact that Hanuman had achieved such destruction in Lanka. So he summons his ministers and he takes counsel with them, at least that much. He begins in an apologetic tone, the first sign of a little humility. What has happened is something strange and unexpected. No one has till now been known to enter into our city and create this kind of destruction. But this envoy of Rama has not only come into Lanka, but he has met and talked with the imprisoned Sita. He has destroyed temples and palaces, and he has slain some of our best warriors, and he has filled our people with fear. And this thing is not likely to stop here. So we have to also consider what should be done, the possibility of further attacks and destruction. You know that the king should decide his course of action only after consulting his loyal ministers of clear vision and well versed in statecraft. This is an admirable quality. And so he says, I have summoned this council. Rama has become an inveterate enemy. Let's consider what we should do about it. Now, the king has no use for ministers who are not straightforward or who are not knowing their own minds or who wobble in their advice. And so the matter before the whole council is most important. Rama is strong, so he must have an army. It's certain that they will continue or contrive somehow to cross the sea. So I think it would be unwise to trust to that single defense. Consider, well, tell me how we can strengthen our security and our city, and how we can boost our army and make a strong defense. What steps we should take to defend ourselves. Anyway, after listening to the king, all the members of the council and the assembly, they spoke with one single voice. Great king, knowing well that our army and our weapons are the strongest in the world, why should we be anxious? This is a great mistake, an overestimation of our capacity on the grounds of adharma, immorality, to defeat the moral forces. So where is the enemy who dares to attack your fortress, and who can oppose your army with any hope of success? Historically, we are the strongest. The world knows your might. You've gotten the boons from Brahma himself. Did you not invade the city of Bhogavati and defeat the Naga king? Didn't you attack the powerful Kubera and defeat him and his yakshas and capture the Pushpaka, Vimana, as well as this island of Lanka? Didn't Maya, in fear of you, sue for your favor and friendships and give you his daughter in marriage? How many cities in the nether region have you not attacked and won and taken? You fought and defeated the Kalakivas, the sons of Varuna, the most mighty god in the ancient Vedas. Yea, and Yama himself have been suppliants for your mercy. And so who is this Rama in comparison to this? Your son Indrajit by himself can destroy Rama and his Vanara army. Did he not seize and imprison Indra himself? That's why he's called Indrajit. And afterwards let him go. How can Rama and his Vanara stand against such a warrior? You have only to bid Indrajit, please destroy this whole Vanara crowd, and everything will be over. Why should you, great king, be anxious? And so this kind of flattery gives the king a boost, Ravana a boost. The commander-in-chief, Prahasta, he now rises like a great black cloud. You who subdued in battle the Devas, the Danavas, and the Gandharvas, why should you, O King of Kings, feel anxious because of these little creatures? It is true that the monkey came here and caught us napping and did some mischief, but this sort of thing will never happen again. He's called the King of Kings. What we do in devotional life, we give the highest royal honor to the King of Kings. In this case, embodied as Rama, not to humans. So anyway, if he comes again, I know how to manage him. I alone can destroy the whole Vanara race if only you order it. You needn't fear any danger from the small indiscretion of yours, the abduction of Sita. To defend the indefensible is a big mistake. And then, of course, another Durmukha rose and roared, we shall not let this monkey's bravado and undeserved good luck go unavenged. I shall go this very instant and destroy the Vanara army, root and branch, and return. I am reminded here of the vast and rapid movement of the Islamic forces in the early days of the spread of Islam. How the greatest armies coming from Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire, and so on, underestimated the Islamic forces that spread like wildfire. So anyway, Vajra Damshtra. Vajra means a lightning bolt. He stood with a terrible iron club in his hand and cried, here is my weapon, unwashed and still covered with the blood and flesh of my enemies. So why waste your time talking about this mere monkey? See, are not Rama and Lakshmana our enemies? I shall slay them first and then destroy the Vanara army and return immediately. Only let me go. I have a piece of advice to give you. He's saying this to Ravana. If you would listen, this is my advice. Let's order some Rakshasa warriors to put on human form and approach Rama, telling him Bharata has sent us in advance. A great army is coming behind to help you. And while Rama is thus fooled into negligence, our Rakshasa army can travel through the sky and destroy him and his followers on the other shore. This is my advice. Now, this kind of advice is a kind of military tactic. We can call it Maya. That is to deceive somebody, and it's a legitimate military method that we can pick up from the great texts on military warfare. We saw it in the Second World War, by the way, at Pearl Harbor, that while the Japanese ambassador is talking nicely in America, in Washington, at the same moment, the Japanese are attacking Pearl Harbor. And everybody's crying out, this is not military ethics. Well, actually, in Oriental strategic planning, it's fine. So the Kumbha, son of Kumbhakarna, he also rose and said, All of you may stay here with the king. I shall go alone and meet and destroy the enemy and bring you the news. Now, the one characteristic of all these advisors, they have big egos. They feel that they alone can do all of this, and they're underestimating the power of truth. And then another Rakshasa, licking his lips, he says with great gusto, I shall go alone. Everyone's saying, I'll go alone, and kill and feast on the flesh of these two men. Rama and Lakshmana, please let me go. He's obviously very hungry as well. Thus, one after another, they get up and speak brave words to please Ravana, and they're all flatterers because they fear him. Then all of them stand together and, raising their weapons, they all roar aloud with one voice. And at this, Vibhishana, the younger brother of Ravana, he makes them all sit down in the voice of reason. And he says to the king with folded hands, humility and reverence, brother, what these people say is sweet sounding, but it's not true or good to act upon all these pieces of advice. Anything that is done to violate or in violation of Niti Shastra, the science of politics, can only lead to grief and ruin. It's only after trying conciliation, sama, and dana, also buying off the enemy, perhaps. We see this technique in modern times as well, diplomatic pursuits. And on the other hand, we find this increase of trade or something of that nature, a kind of economic bargaining, because politics is economics. So we can try these things, sama, dana, and also bheda, that is, sowing discord is another legitimate technique to confuse the enemy. So these are all legitimate means in playing this game. And so he says we should think of using force of arms against an enemy just as a last resort here. We have to try these other things first. If you take the advice of these people and start a war now, it would really mean the destruction of Lanka and all of us. And he says this on the grounds of what he's seen, and also from a sense of dharma. He says we should also consider the demands of dharma. It wasn't right what you did. It was indeed a great sin for you to have seized and brought Rama's wife here. We should first cleanse ourselves of this sin. What harm did Rama do to us? What Rama did in the Dandaka forest was in pure self-defense and the defense of those that looked to him for protection. He fought with and slew only those that went out to slay him. His actions surely don't justify your carrying away his wife. And even if we had any just complaint against him, we should have met in battle. Instead of that, to contrive his absence and seize his wife was very wrong and sinful. So when the fault is on your side, it's normally not right that we should think of battle. And further, warcraft requires that before fighting, we should take some measure of Rama's strength, that of his army. You've spoken all rashly and assumed that his army is impotent and just made from monkeys. We should surely send some spies across and assess, this is the right thing to do, what is the force of this army? So you can see amongst the advisors impulsiveness. This is not how we should behave. We are often inclined toward impulsiveness. Much better to stand back and evaluate with cool heads. So he says, we've had some taste of Hanuman's strength and skill. It's pointless to talk lightly of him. Didn't he do some remarkable things here? Though our own strength may be great, we should also weigh it against the enemy's strength and then decide where or whether we should seek war or whether we should avoid it. But first, it is essential that we should restore Sita. My advice is this: before Rama and the Vanaras attack Lanka, let's restore Sita first. Dear brother, I am saying all this for your own good. Please don't be angry with me. We should first set right our own fault and then think of other things. What do you think he is representing? He's representing the intellect. We always have to apply the intellect. And thus, with folded hands, Vibhishana, who's representing the voice of reason, he beseeches Ravana. And though Ravana was pleased with the vainglorious words of all his ministers and generals, there was still a doubt lurking in his mind. And so after listening to Vibhishana, he says, all right, let's meet again tomorrow and consider this matter. And he adjoins the council and retires. And that brings then us to an episode which recalls the council and see what their decision is, whether it is rational, whether it is not. We leave that off there to pick it up for next week, and the story of Rama and the story now of Rama and all the other characters we find there, the Ramayana. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace unto all. Jai Shri Ramchandra Ki Jai.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.